Hello everyone. Welcome back to our channel where we dive deep into real-life crime stories that haunt us, shock us, and leave us with lessons we'll never forget. Today we're traveling back to 2009 to a chilling case that rocked Yale University, one of the most prestigious schools in the United States, a place where the brightest minds come together to chase their dreams. But in this sanctuary of knowledge and ambition, a horrifying tragedy unfolded. The victim was Annie Liu, a 24-year-old Vietnamese-American woman, a brilliant doctoral student with a future full of promise. She was the pride of her family, a rising star in her academic community, and just days away from her wedding, the happiest day of her life. But just a few days before she was set to walk down the aisle in her white wedding dress, Annie was brutally murdered inside the very lab where she worked at Yale. What happened on that fateful day? Who was behind this gruesome crime? And why did a young woman with so much potential have to meet such a tragic end? Let's dive into this heartbreaking story together. Annie Liu, or Tu Le as her family affectionately called her, was born on July 8, 1985, in San Diego, California, to a Vietnamese-American family. Her parents were immigrants from Vietnam, carrying the American dream in their hearts as they built a better life for their children. From a young age, Annie stood out with her extraordinary intelligence and incredible work ethic. Her mom often shared stories about how, even as a little girl, Annie loved reading science books and would ask endless curious questions about the world around her. Her biggest dream was to become a biomedical researcher, hoping that one day she could find a cure for cancer, a disease that claims millions of lives every year, including those of people close to her friends. When she was in high school at DI, Union Mine High School in El Dorado, California, Annie was always at the top of her class. She wasn't just a straight A student. She was also incredibly active in extracurricular activities, from science clubs to community service. Her high school principal, Tony DeVille, said during her graduation ceremony, "Annie is a dynamic student with an amazing character, loved by her teachers and peers alike. She's one of the top 2 students in her senior class, and someone who lives with purpose. We're confident that Annie will go on to do great things." Those words weren't an exaggeration. Annie truly was exceptional. With her stellar academic record, Annie easily earned a $160,000 scholarship to attend the University of Rochester in New York, a top-tier school known for its strong science programs. There she majored in cell biology and medical anthropology, 2 fields that demand both perseverance and sharp analytical thinking. Her friends at Rochester nicknamed her the next Einstein because of her incredible intellect and creative, problem-solving skills. But Annie wasn't just a brainiac. She was also a petite, graceful young woman with a distinctly East Asian charm, always radiating positivity and energy. She had a warm heart, a contagious laugh, and a genuine willingness to help those around her. In 2008, after graduating from college with honors, Annie was accepted into the doctoral program in pharmacology at Yale University, one of the most prestigious schools in the world, part of the Ivy League, a place that has produced countless notable figures, from US presidents like Bill Clinton to Nobel Prize-winning scientists. Annie set a goal to earn her PhD by 2013, and she worked tirelessly to make that dream a reality. Beyond her studies, Annie was involved in various extracurricular activities at Yale. She even wrote a paper about campus safety titled "Crime and Safety in New Haven," showing how much she cared about security issues, a detail that, in hindsight, feels heartbreakingly ironic. On top of her thriving academic career, Annie had a fairy tale romance with Jonathan Widowski, a graduate of Columbia University with degrees in physics and applied mathematics. They met while Annie was at Rochester, and they quickly became best friends before falling in love. Jonathan later shared in an interview, "Annie was the first girl who made my heart skip a beat. She wasn't just brilliant, she was so gentle and funny. I always felt so lucky to be with her." After dating for a while, they got engaged and planned their wedding for September 13th, 2009 in Long Island. Annie had picked out a stunning white wedding dress, and she couldn't stop talking to her friends about how excited she was to become Jonathan's wife. But no one could have imagined that the happiest day of her life would turn into an unimaginable tragedy. On September 8, 2009, just 5 days before her wedding, Annie was hard at work in the lab at Yale's Animal Research Center, as she often was. Even with her wedding approaching, Annie didn't want to fall behind on her research. She left her apartment that morning, telling her roommate she'd be back in the evening to keep preparing for the big day. But when evening came, her roommate realized Annie hadn't returned and she couldn't get in touch with her. Jonathan, her fiancé, also tried calling but got no response. Worried, they decided to call the police. At first, the police thought Annie might be experiencing cold feet, a psychological phenomenon where some people feel overwhelmed before their wedding and take off for a few days to clear their heads. But as they dug deeper, they realized this wasn't the case at all. Annie was a cautious person who always prioritized her safety. She rarely went to unfamiliar places alone and made a habit of keeping her friends and family updated on her whereabouts. When the police searched her workspace in the lab, they found her cell phone and wallet still neatly placed on her desk. Everything in the room was in perfect order, no signs of a struggle or anything out of place. This discovery sent a chill down the investigators' spines. Fortunately, Yale University had a robust security system, with 75 surveillance cameras installed across the campus, covering everything from main walkways to key areas. While the lab itself didn't have cameras due to privacy and confidentiality concerns, the entrances and exits were closely monitored. The police requested all the footage from September 8th and began reviewing it, frame by frame. In the footage, they saw Annie entering the lab building at 10:11 a.m., wearing a brown skirt and a green blouse, holding a stack of research papers. She flashed a small smile as she walked through the door, as if she was thinking about something happy. That was the last time she was seen alive. At 12:55 p.m. that same day, a fire alarm suddenly went off in the lab building. Everyone, students, staff, researchers, evacuated the building immediately, following standard safety protocols. But among the crowd of people leaving, no one saw Annie. The cameras at the exits didn't capture her leaving the building either. This meant that Annie had vanished in a window of less than 3 hours, between 10:11 a.m. and 12:55 p.m. Standing at just 4'11" and with a petite frame, the police wondered if someone could have stuffed her into a suitcase, a large bag, or some kind of container to smuggle her out without being noticed. But when they reviewed the footage, they saw that no one leaving the building was carrying anything suspicious. The police expanded their search, even sifting through the lab's waste disposal in hopes of finding a clue. But they came up empty-handed. 3 days passed with no sign of Annie. The entire Yale campus was shrouded in a dark cloud of fear and uncertainty. Students and faculty began to feel uneasy, avoiding walking alone on campus. The university offered a $10,000 reward for any information leading to Annie's whereabouts, but no one came forward with anything useful. Jonathan flew in from New York as soon as he heard the news, and Annie's parents rushed from California, waiting in agony for any updates. Annie's mom, Vivian Lee, later recalled, "I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat. I just kept praying that my daughter was still alive, that this was all a nightmare we'd wake up from." Under immense pressure from the public and the media, the police decided to conduct a more thorough search of the lab building, focusing on the basement where Annie worked. The basement of the Animal Research Center was a sprawling area, housing hundreds of animals used for scientific experiments. The air was cold and damp, filled with the stench of animal waste and chemicals. One staff member described the place as feeling like an underground tomb, with long, dimly lit hallways and the eerie sounds of animals echoing through the space. The police mobilized hundreds of officers, splitting them into teams to comb through every inch of the area. They used luminol, a chemical that glows when it detects blood even if the scene has been cleaned. Sure enough, they found faint traces of blood on the door of lab room G13, where Annie often worked. Nearby, in a hidden corner, they discovered a blue rubber glove, a white sock, and a yellow lab coat stashed on the ceiling, all stained with Annie's blood. Another team stumbled upon a small bead in a changing room behind lab G22. After cross-referencing, with records, they confirmed the bead came from a necklace Annie often wore, a gift from her mum that held deep sentimental value, something she always kept close. As the search continued, everyone started noticing a foul, overpowering smell that grew stronger by the minute, but they couldn't pinpoint its source. The area was filled with small rooms, none of which seemed large enough to hide a person. This left the investigators puzzled and increasingly anxious. Finally, the police brought in a K9 unit trained to detect the scent of human remains. The dog quickly picked up a scent and led them to a wall where a metal panel, about the size of a computer monitor, was bolted in place, typically used for pipe maintenance. As the officers carefully unscrewed the bolts and removed the panel, they were met with a sight that left them in shock: a decomposing body stuffed upside down into the narrow space behind the wall. It was Annie Lou. She was wearing only one sock on her foot, with a blue glove on one hand, and her body had begun to decompose after being hidden in the confined space for days. September 13th, the day that was supposed to be Annie's wedding, the day she would have worn her white dress and walked down the aisle with Jonathan, became the day of her funeral. It was a reality that her family and loved ones couldn't bear to accept. The autopsy revealed that Annie had died of asphyxiation due to trauma to her neck. She had a broken jaw and collarbone, injuries sustained while she was still alive, meaning she endured unimaginable pain before her death. Investigators concluded that Annie had fought back, but her attacker was too strong and she couldn't escape her tragic fate. Annie's case sent shockwaves across the United States. The day after her body was found, over 2,000 people gathered on Yale's campus, lighting candles in her memory. The flickering flames in the darkness were like a silent prayer for Annie's soul to find peace. But the case also left a deep scar on the Yale community. Students became terrified, refusing to go to classes or work in the labs alone, always traveling in groups for safety. Yale was forced to tighten security, restricting lab access to only students and staff with key cards, each programmed to unlock specific doors. The police quickly identified three main suspects: Raymond Clark III, a 24-year-old animal lab technician who worked in the same area as Annie; Larry, a maintenance worker in the basement; and Jonathan Widarski, Annie's fiancé. Jonathan was cleared almost immediately. He had a solid alibi, as he was in New York at the time of the incident, and his phone records showed he'd been trying to reach Annie. Larry was also released after his story checked out with the surveillance footage. He said he'd only been in Annie's lab briefly to replace some lighting equipment, and he left with the crowd when the fire alarm went off. All eyes turned to Raymond Clark. Raymond had been working at Yale for years and knew the lab building like the back of his hand. His keycard gave him broad access, including to Annie's lab. He'd had a minor conflict with Annie in the past over how to handle lab mice, a seemingly trivial issue that had caused tension between them. When questioned, Raymond claimed he saw Annie leave the lab at 12:03 p.m., but the cameras didn't show this. After the fire alarm went off, footage showed Raymond leaving the building and sitting on the steps outside, looking distressed, his hands cradling his head as if deep in thought. A lab staff member later recalled, "I saw Raymond sitting there and he looked really uneasy. I thought something was off, but no one could have imagined he was involved in something so horrific." The police dug deeper and found a red flag. Raymond had entered and exited Annie's lab 11 times in a short period that morning, between early morning and noon on September 8th. Per lab protocol, everyone had to sign in with a pen at the door. Annie always used a green pen, while Raymond used a black one. But on one occasion, he used a green pen, the same kind Annie used, leading the police to suspect he might have taken her pen, possibly during the incident. The cameras also showed Raymond wearing a yellow lab coat, the same kind found on the ceiling with Annie's blood on it. When he left the building after the fire alarm, there was a red stain on his clothes that looked like blood, but when he returned, the stain was gone, suggesting he'd changed to cover his tracks. To solidify their case, the police called in Dr. Henry Lee, a renowned forensic expert of Chinese descent, often called the Chinese Sherlock Holmes. Dr. Lee has helped solve countless high-profile cases, from the O.J. Simpson trial to the JonBenet Ramsey case. With his vast experience, Dr. Lee arrived at the scene and began analyzing the evidence. He conducted DNA tests on the sign-in pen, the glove, the sock, and the lab coat found at the scene. The results were undeniable. All the items contained DNA from both Annie and Raymond. Dr. Lee stated, "This is irrefutable evidence. No matter how he tries to explain it, Raymond cannot deny the fact that he was directly involved in Annie's death." On September 18, 2009, just 10 days after Annie went missing, Raymond Clark was arrested at a hotel 30 miles from Yale, charged with murder. The court set his bail at $3 million, but Raymond couldn't pay it and was held in a maximum security prison in Connecticut. His trial began on October 6, 2009. In court, Raymond didn't fight the murder charge, instead bowing his head and apologizing to Annie's family and fiancé. With a trembling voice, he said, "Annie was a good person. I'm so sorry for taking her life and causing so much pain to so many people. I don't know what I can say to make up for what I've done." On March 17, 2011, after several hearings, Raymond pleaded guilty, but denied the additional charge of attempted assault on Annie, which prosecutors had added based on the condition of her body. In the end, he was sentenced to 44 years in prison, with a release date set for 2053, when he'll be 68 years old. Raymond's father, Raymond Clark Sr., stood outside the courtroom and spoke to the press. "My heart is heavy standing here today. My son has been deeply remorseful from the start. He told me his heart has been tormented by what he did to Annie, but no matter how much he regrets it, we can't change the fact that a young woman is gone forever." Annie's mum, Vivian Lee, couldn't attend the trial, overwhelmed by the emotional toll. In a tearful interview with the media, she sobbed, "My daughter deserved a happy life after her wedding. She used to tell me all about her plans for the future, becoming a scientist, having beautiful children, but I never imagined that the day we planned her wedding would be the day we got the devastating news of her death. I've lost my daughter forever, and I'll never get to meet my grandchildren." Even after his conviction, Raymond never revealed the true reason behind his actions. The police theorized that Raymond may have had an unrequited crush on Annie. He worked in the same area as her, often seeing her in the lab, and might have developed feelings for her. When he learned she was getting married, he couldn't handle the jealousy. An email forwarded to Raymond by a colleague mentioning Annie's upcoming wedding might have been the final straw, pushing him to act impulsively. Raymond's ex-girlfriend also shared that he had a controlling personality. She said, "When we first started dating, Raymond was kind and gentle, but over time, he started asking me little details about my life, what I was wearing, what I was doing, who I was hanging out with. I realized he was very controlling and it made me feel suffocated. On the day of the murder, a high-pressure device in the lab released steam, triggering a false fire alarm. In the chaos, as everyone evacuated, Raymond hid Annie's body in the wall to cover up his crime. He also carefully stashed the evidence, like the glove, sock, and lab coat, on the ceiling, showing how familiar he was with the area and how calculated he was in trying to avoid detection. After Annie's death, Yale University established a scholarship fund in her name to honor the memory of a talented researcher. October 12th was designated as a day to remember Annie, with students and faculty coming together for events in her honor. Annie's family donated the money from her funeral and other contributions to the fund, also supporting organizations that help low-income children access education. They hoped Annie's legacy would continue to inspire future generations, especially those from disadvantaged backgrounds, to pursue their dreams. On September 22, 2009, hundreds of people attended Annie's memorial service at a church in Huntington, New York. During the 90-minute ceremony, family and friends held hands and sang Amazing Grace in both English and Vietnamese, a deeply emotional farewell. The moment Annie's younger brother called out to her in Vietnamese, "Thu, I miss you, always love you," brought everyone to tears. Annie was laid to rest at El Dorado Hills Cemetery near Sacramento on September 26, 2009, in a small but meaningful ceremony attended by her closest family and friends. Annie Lou's death wasn't just a personal tragedy, it was a wake-up call about campus safety. After the case, not only Yale but many schools across the US started taking security more seriously. Measures like stricter key card access, more surveillance cameras and safety training sessions became widespread. Schools are meant to be places where talent is nurtured, and every student deserves to feel safe while pursuing their dreams without the fear of hidden dangers. Though Annie is no longer with us, she lives on in the hearts of her family, friends, and community. Her story reminds us that life is fragile, and we should cherish every moment with the ones we love. Annie left this world at just 24 years old, when her life was brimming with youth, dreams, and aspirations. But her legacy, her perseverance, her passion, and her warm heart will continue to inspire us all. Thank you so much for watching today's video. If you found this story meaningful, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss our next video. We'll keep bringing you real stories, haunting cases, and valuable life lessons. See you in the next one. Goodbye.